Better Buildings for Humans is powered by Advanced Glazings, makers of the Solera line of products. Solera is the leading glass glazing made specifically for architectural daylighting and with extreme insulation performance. Learn more at advancedglazings.com. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Better Buildings for Humans. I'm your host, Joe Menchefski, and this is the podcast where we take a look at the impact that the built environment has on our health, our wellness, our productivity, and our just general joy of being alive. And of course, we always talk about sustainable design on the show. And to that note, I want to introduce Jenny Heim from McMillan Pazdan Smith in North Carolina. Jenny, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for having me.
We've been talking for a long time. Jenny and I spent months trying to coordinate a time when we could actually do this. So I'm really excited to finally have this conversation. Let's start, Jenny, the same way I always start, by learning a little bit about you. Tell us, first of all, why you chose architecture as a career. That would be first. And then second, tell us about the path that led to you becoming the sustainable design leader at MPS.
Well, again, thank you, Joe, for having me. Thanks for the invitation. And yes, finally happy to speak with you and have this conversation. So first, why did I choose architecture? I'd like to take a quick walk down memory lane and think of how I was influenced growing up. So I was a super creative kid who loved to draw, and I was a Girl Scout. So if you know anything about Girl Scouts, one way to learn and explore different subjects is to do specific activities to earn badges. And one of the badges was architecture. And wow, I really jumped into that badge. I drew house plan after house plan. I sketched buildings. And I think that's where my love of being both creative and how it manifested itself in the real world really began, right? We live in a physical world and not on paper. So it was a way to connect those two. And then another big influence was that my dad is from Austria. And I was very fortunate as a kid to visit Austria 3 times and as a kid. And so those visits really impacted me in a significant way in that they exposed me to really old, beautiful, lasting buildings and a built environment that didn't center around cars. And not only were the buildings and towns hundreds of years old, the new buildings were also built to last another 100, maybe 200-300 years, right? So there was this legacy of old buildings and old infrastructure. And there was a very intentional conservation efforts to enhance and preserve much of the natural beauty. It's a really beautiful country if you've never been. So an amazing legacy, right? Secondly, so my path to becoming a sustainable design leader at McMillan Pazdan Smith, which I will actually just refer to as MPS from now on, it's a mouthful, begins at a higher ed. So I had my undergraduate education at Penn State University, and there I took several classes for sustainability and community-based design. But a professor really encouraged me to pursue a higher level of education in sustainable design. I think he sort of saw some of my interests and helped me pursue that path. And then I attended the University of Texas at Austin, where I received my master's of architecture in sustainable design. And that's where I learned the theory behind sustainable design and development, where sustainability is really the intersection of the environment, the economy, and community, or the social component. And sometimes that's referred to as the triple bottom line. There's a specific graphic partie that shows 3 intersecting circles, and that's a really great visual where sustainability is sort of that intersection of all those. And that sort of has laid the foundation of how I think about sustainability today and how everything is connected, how it's expansive. And in turn, and this is how I talk about it with clients and with designers today, with those who I work with. So as I moved into my professional career, my first professional internship was with an architecture firm in Austin, Texas. And I worked on a team that was working on a very large corporate campus in South Austin. It was the AMD corporate technology campus. And it had really ambitious sustainability project goals, but it was also a really contentious project. It was being built over a highly sensitive watershed called the Edwards Aquifer, and it had a lot of community and political scrutiny. That was a really formidable project for me to work on because it taught me the project isn't always just about the building, right? It's not always about just the project site. It's bigger than just the building. It's about the community and the place that it sits. It was also an amazing opportunity that really integrated early design strategies, where a lot of the big opportunities lie, and how we as designers can really influence the outcomes of a project with these ideas. A few of the big initial first moves had to deal with the sensitivity of water usage. So the project had a 1.5 million gallon underground cistern that helped collect some of that rainwater. And second, in terms of the building design, there was a very intentional daylighting and views strategy. So I have a specific wall section in mind where I helped illustrate daylighting strategy into the open offices. There was a light shelf, the roof was angled, the ceiling was angled, and that helped optimize daylight to those open office spaces. There's also an underground air distribution to help with flexibility of open office. So, there's a lot of really early integration of those ideas at the beginning. So continuing on, after working with that firm for many years, I made some career moves that allowed me to work as a sustainability consultant, where I worked on over 80 green building certification projects like LEED, Fitwell, WELL, AEGB, which is Austin's green building program. And so those years really allowed me to get nerdy and technical with some of those strategies and implementation. And those also helped me understand the accountability and transparency required to understand these strategies and how they actually get done in practice. And again, in a tangible way. But I had moved to Asheville, North Carolina, where I live currently in the end of 2013. And while I worked with clients and projects in Austin for many years after that, I really wanted to work again in my community. And that's where I met McMillan Pazdan Smith. And that's where I finally made my way to where I am today. And so I've worked with MPS for almost 3 years. MPS had sustainable high performance buildings, but they did not have a sustainable design leader. And I think my experience and some of my prior work experience was able to help form that role and to really integrate sustainable leadership firm-wide.
Oh, fantastic. So several things I have to follow up on there. First of all, Asheville is one of the most beautiful cities in America. As far as I'm concerned, it's one of my favorite places. Were you impacted by the flooding last year or last?
Yes, we were personally. And of course, our community was impacted significantly. But yes, unfortunately, our home was flooded, but we were safe. We were able to, recover from that. And we're really plugged into the community, helping everyone because there's still a long ways to go.
I was going to ask you that next. Like, what kind of state is it in now? Is things mostly settled? There's still some work to do.
Yeah, it's a strange reality because some parts of town didn't get impacted by the flood directly. So they are fine, right? They are great. And there's a lot of parts of town or in just all of Western North Carolina that were significantly impacted. And so you can still see those areas. Some buildings were just torn down not that long ago. It took that long to get insurance or whatever it is, the process to get that going. So yeah, it's the physical scars are still very evident.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Introducing Solera Reserve from Advanced Glazings, making luxury homes even more beautiful and more healthy using cool, controlled natural light. Okay, what does it mean to be a sustainable design lead? What's your typical week, your typical month look like, Jenny?
I love this question. So my role as a sustainable design leader is someone who can work across the practice areas firm-wide. So MPS has multiple different practice areas. So they focus on different sectors of the industry like higher ed, K-12, living, commercial, civic and cultural, healthcare. So my role is to help with the consistency for strategy across all of those practice areas, and also to help develop and support the teams working on all those projects. So, we're a firm with over 450 people. So there's a lot, and, 11 studio locations, physical locations. So it's a large firm, and that allows for the firm to have some consistency in that strategy. But I also work with teams to help develop support and some educational content. I also work specifically on projects that have high sustainability goals. So I will work with project teams to help define them, develop a strategy, and work with clients. But most importantly, I think my role is to support the integration of design excellence and sustainability. So it's marrying the design process and goals or the outcomes into holistic strategy. So we like to define design excellence as an intentional and elevated focus on design process and impact. And it gives a framework for transparency, measurable impact, and data. We also like to say we can only improve what we measure, right? So if we don't measure some of the impacts of our building, then how can we improve that upon that and learn from that? Yeah.
Do you still manage projects, Jenny, or are you mostly just supporting the other project manager?
I have moved away from managing projects, although I am still working on one. I am moving away from managing and just helping supporting firm-wide.
All right. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Like you've alluded to a few things that I wanted to talk about already. And that's, you've got multiple credentials in both the sustainable side of it, the lead side of it, GBI, whatever program you're working with. And you've also got the sort of the wellness side of it, the fit well, the well. Now, very broadly speaking, how do you blend like sustainability and then the human health component of these projects, put them together? Where do you see the greatest opportunity to merge all of those opportunities to merge both health and energy sustainability management together to create these, really functional, high performance buildings?
Well, it's another great question. And I like to blend the two by always looking for those both and opportunities, right? So I think traditionally, or in my experience, there has been a little bit of an opposing goals or opposing outcomes for health and environmental sustainability, or, I think of energy efficiency. But what I find is that if we can support, or if we can find solutions that support both of them, both the environmental sustainability component and human health, if we can find a link to blend those, then they become inseparable, right? So once you take one away, you're impacting both. Or if the design solution does not include that, then you take away both. So if you can find a way to integrate them, I find those to be the most successful ways to do that. And, blending the two is seeing the opportunities of highest impact and outcomes. And I'll use a specific project example. So MPS's Greenville Technical College, Prisma Health Center and Life Sciences. Sorry, it's a mouthful. It's an example of integrating both environmental sustainability with human health. In this case, for optimized learning, right? So it's a really successful example of that. So first of all, it's a building that provides a central cohesive location for healthcare learning. So bridge, and I believe this opportunity where you're bringing both the real world experience into the educational setting creates a really robust learning environment. And there are clinical spaces and simulation spaces, and there's a lot of collaborative spaces that the college did not have previously. And so together with that, it achieved Green Globe's certification. So we have that data and that transparency. We understand the impacts from the environmental sustainability aspect, but it also incorporates daylight and visibility into every classroom. And all of the occupied spaces have used the outdoors. So this example provides an active, collaborative space, open and airy. Students are able to collaborate with other students, with faculty, and it creates an opportunity for that really robust learning environment. And that physical environment fosters that sort of social learning that helps the learning, but also helps in their careers. They can be successful in both.
I love that. Okay, let's share a tip or tips and tricks for others in this profession. Jenny, are there things that you do right at the outset or that you encourage your coworkers to do at the very beginning that allows you to be more successful in having both, carbon and wellness goals happening simultaneously, like we just talked about? Are there big decisions early on that can make that process easier as you get further down the line?
Oh, absolutely. There are a lot of tips and tricks, but I
Okay.
do want to do one quick thing first. So
Okay.
I think embodied carbon is not a new term, but I think it's a fairly new-ish term for the industry and for some folks who may not be as familiar with it. So if it's okay, I'd like to define what embodied carbon is.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to read this so I don't mess it up. I just like to have common language and lay that groundwork. So embodied carbon is the emissions generated by manufacturing, transportation, installation, maintenance, and disposal of construction materials used in buildings, roads, and other infrastructure. So this is a definition by the Carbon Leadership Forum. If you've never heard of Carbon Leadership Forum, they're a great group that provides educational and advocacy support for reducing embodied carbon in our built environment. So this is, different than the operational carbon or the energy we use to operate our buildings. So those together create sort of our whole carbon picture. And this is a better way to understand our full impact of building and operating buildings in our built environment. I like to share this fact, and I like to share that basis because it comprises of almost 45% of our total emissions. And that's a huge amount. We have a huge opportunity and a huge impact on our built environment. So I just like to give the why, the background. I really think it helps lay that groundwork. So getting back to your question, the biggest impacts on embodied carbon and wellness, I think sometimes are those biggest decisions at the beginning of a project or even before the project, right? Sometimes we're not even part of those conversations, but I like to say the biggest opportunity is maybe reusing a building, an existing building. So how can we use an existing building that serves the project's goals, but also serves the community in a way, and especially if the building is a culturally important building, or if it's centrally located, or if it's, it's already has the infrastructure around it. How can we encourage our clients or our projects to look for those opportunities? The buildings are already there. The materials are already extracted in place. So that's a huge opportunity to reduce embodied carbon. But on the wellness side, it sort of speaks to that social or community health in addition to the individual human health. So it helps to create a physical built environment that preserves what's already there. But, we can't often use or reuse an existing building. So when we think about a new building opportunity, or if there's a new building is the only solution, how do we optimize the space? Can it be smaller than scoped? Are there opportunities for flexible spaces for multiple uses? So these are the types of questions and tips that I tell teams. Is it sufficient for the current needs and the future needs? We don't want to overbuild, but we also want to make sure that we are thinking about those future needs that the building might use. So those are some of those really big early questions. And then we move to the design of the building, right? And of the materials that comprise it. So the structure, the envelope, and finishes have huge impacts on overall embodied carbon, right? So how can we explore structures that optimize wood or mass timber, concrete and steel are those big heavy hitters for embodied carbon? How can we potentially use a hybrid system where there's more wood structure involved or created? And then, wood also has, of course, proven impacts on wellness, right? That physical connection to a natural material. It has impact on thermal comfort and cognitive performance. So that is, I think, a way to touch on both embodied carbon and occupant health. And other opportunity is glazing, right? So what is that optimal air, light, and movement of space that create, but again, optimizing that. Glazing and aluminum are also high embodied carbon products, but we can't not use them. So I think, how do we optimize the use of those materials? And again, it's not maximizing, it's more about finding the balance between the two. And it makes me think of those centuries old buildings in Austria that I visited as a kid, right? So can we design for a 200-year-old building? Like, how do we think the lifespan of our current buildings and how, we may be impacting generations that we'll never meet, hopefully to use that. So for example, the building that I'm in is a 1916 building, and it's been reused multiple times, and it now houses offices, retail space. There's a brewery downstairs. So, there's a lot of value in preserving some of the existing building stock that we have. And how can we really try to encourage our teams to talk to clients about that?
Right on, right on. So you mentioned daylighting in there, both health and energy benefits when you're using natural light. MPS does a lot of schools. I assume that daylighting is involved with pretty much every school you would do. Is that a reasonable assumption?
Absolutely. Yes, it's involved. It's almost a best practice, right? It's included for everything. It's included in all buildings that we design, but especially in education buildings, K-12 and higher ed.
Right. Do you want to bring lots of healthy, beautiful natural light in your building and still meet energy codes? Try Solera from Advanced Glazings. Learn more at advancedglazings.com. Let's talk about materials. You talked a lot about materials. So let's just go a little bit more on it. Life cycle assessment, the low carbon specs that you mentioned. What have you learned in terms of picking materials, choosing materials, specifying materials that allow you to meet these, low toxicity, maybe biophilic type goals, while also still meeting the other climate related goals, the sort of like the ongoing maintenance type goals and all of that? Do you have any best practices when it comes to choosing materials to optimize all the millions of things that you have to optimize these days?
Yeah, well, that's a very layered question, but, and I can talk about it in a few different ways, but I think I want to bring it back a little bit to the community I live in, Asheville, right? We talked about Helene and how it really impacted our communities. And so, like I said before, the physical scars are really still evident in a lot of places. And we're thinking about this and talking about this a lot. How do we build back better? How do we mitigate and adapt to our changing environment? What are the decisions that we're making that will impact us 5, 10, 15, 50 years in the future, right? I spoke at a low carbon concrete symposium last year. And while concrete was the theme of the event, it was apparent that their industry and a lot of industries are really aware of the increasing demand for lower impact concrete solutions and lower impact materials and healthy materials. So, we know that concrete isn't going away. We know that, we still need new materials for our buildings. So what I've learned is that we need to partner with our consultants. We need to partner with industry partners to really talk and understand how we can specify and install lower impact materials. So I really find that collaborating with our consultants and our team members and our industry partners is the way we're really going to move this forward and accelerate. We can't just sit here in our offices and specify things and think that we're getting the full picture. I think that's the best way to move forward. And especially how we can marry these lower carbon materials with beauty and biophilia and, just that psychological well-being and cognitive performance and helping us really optimize our health inside a building. So, we also have a lot of, or I should say in the region, a major abundance of wood, right? So how can we integrate mass timber and wood finishes in our buildings on a larger scale? The West Coast is seeing a lot of mass timber integration or adoption, and we're learning, I think, a lot of how we can bring that to the East Coast. But, there's opportunities to do that with hybrid structural system, right? Steel and wood. How can we do that together? And thankfully, I think some clients and contractors are getting more familiar with that. And that, I think, allows, again, us to connect that wellness with the material transparency and material health MPS has several mass timber projects, and one that's really a great example of that is the Wofford College Chandler Center for Environmental Studies. They have cross-laminated timber structure, and they decks and roof panels, and that all uses southern yellow pine, right, which is a regional resource that we are quite abundant in.
Yeah, it's amazing how far mass timber has come just in these past few years. I mean, I work in translucent glazing for architectural daylighting, and the look is fairly modern, right? And most of the projects we've worked on have been, a very modern, clean, bright, sort of airy type design. But lately, we've been used on mass timber a lot. So that combination of a very sort of traditional vibe, traditional feel of the wood with a space age technical project together, it's working. It's working. I could show you some of the designs, and it was really cool to see sort of the it's almost like the past and the future coming together simultaneously to create something lovely. I have to ask you about the occupant wellness aspect of it. And maybe this is a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I'll be the dumb one. Do you ever get pushback from a client where they don't want to prioritize occupant wellness in a particular design? And if so, how do you handle that?
I just find that if we can find the way to talk to a client in the way that they're willing to listen, it allows us to really marry both occupant health with whatever they are prioritizing. So I think, again, it's a way to connect the dots between the two. So I think the language that we're using and the way we're talking about it is really important for the success of the project.
Okay, I want to ask you a very personal question just for fun. What's your favorite thing about working with MPS now? You said it's close to 3 years. What are a couple of your favorite things about being part of this firm?
Well, I am really lucky because I love all the people that I work with. I think that is a really important part of being at MPS is that, we really value our culture. We value hearing everyone's voice. We are really collaborative. Everyone is really receptive to ideas and talking about things. And so I really love the people that I work with, and I just love it. It's great. And one of our core values is we, not I. So that really resonates with me because I think we're only better together. We're better. We can make more of an impact when we work together. Our ideas work better when we have feedback, and that the culture here really encourages that. And it's really great to be a part of.
Ah, fantastic. I love to hear that. All right, let's go to my universal question. So there's a question I ask every guest every week, and I ask them to answer from whatever perspective they'd like. So here you go, Jenny. What makes a great building?
Well, to come full circle, I think, and to get a little bit personal, right? I believe a great building is one that you want to preserve and one that you want your kids and their kids to experience and love. So I really find that's a way to build a lasting and enduring space and physical space and environment that we want to be in. So there's that human connection to place and how we care for and love our place in the world. And I think a lot of the things that we talked about today support that. Again, it's using those strategies and using those solutions to help create a space that you love and that you want to be in and that you want to care for and you want it to last. So that's what I believe makes a great building.
I love it. I absolutely love it. All right. Before we go, is there any upcoming events or anything that you'd like to promote, Jenny? Anything exciting happening with you or with MPS that the world needs to know about?
Yeah, well, MPS is growing, and 2025 has been a big year. MPS acquired South Carolina's oldest practicing architecture firm, Jumper Carter Cease, West Columbia. We have a Huntsville, Alabama studio that was established in the summer, and we expanded to Columbus, Georgia, and Auburn, Alabama in September. So what's really exciting about that is that we get to really impact the communities and, and expand that impact in a positive way. We are also participating in the AIA 2030 commitment actively, and we also signed the AIA Materials Pledge. I think you've likely heard that from some previous podcast attendees. So yeah, we're really excited to be participating in that and just engaging firm-wide some of these practices that will impact all of our projects, not just those that are going for certification or have high sustainability goals. Yeah.
Anything else? Sorry,
no, that's all. I think, I mentioned we have 11 studios and 450 employees. So, we are growing, but I think the biggest things are happening internally and also making sure that all of our projects are the best that they can be.
Wonderful. Jenny, thank you so much for making the time to do this. And I'm so glad it was absolutely worth the wait of finally being able to schedule and get some time together. Jenny, thank you again. And I wish you the best of luck in your growth and proliferation of your brilliant ideas within the Southeast. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
All right. You take care.
Thanks.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Better Buildings for Humans. For more information on the world's best light diffusing and highly insulating glass glazing, please visit advancedglazings.com.